Haeckel's Tale is a 2006 American horror film written by Mick Garris based on a Clive Barker short story and directed by John McNaughton. It stars Derek Cecil, Gerard Plunkett, Mickey Monsell, and John Polito, aka Silvio from Seinfeld. I don't like a Newman. The plot follows a man seeking the help of an old necromancer in hopes that she can bring back his recently passed wife, but instead is told the tale of Ernst Haeckel. Haeckel was a doctor who was actually inspired by Dr. Victor Frankenstein in Europe. So yeah, this story takes place in the same universe, which I think is actually really cool. That might sound gimmicky. It really barely is. I think really Frankenstein's name is only mentioned one time. But unlike Dr. Frankenstein, his attempts at creating life have not worked. So about a year ago, I decided to kind of go through the Masters of Horror series again. It's been a long time since I'd watched them. And it's been a slow process. I think this has just been the second one I've watched so far. So I have a ways to go, especially at this snail's pace. So other than the Masters of Horror name, I was actually interested in this for a few other reasons. For one, John McNaughton. He directed a movie I've always, been fascinated by, and one of the grittiest, most disturbing, movies I've ever seen. 1980s Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Another reason, though, is that I'm also a Clive Barker fan. I love Clive Barker. I love his writing. I love his books. Although I haven't read this particular story. George Romero was actually supposed to direct this originally, but he couldn't. Then Roger Corman was slated to, and he couldn't either. So we got John McNaughton. Now, as far as Clive Barker's influence goes, if you've only seen the Hellraiser movies, you might be surprised that his writing is actually kind of all over the place as far as like time periods and stuff like that. He's actually pretty creative. And there's several doses of sex and nudity and some definite morbidity here. That kind of sums up Clive Barker's writing in a nutshell. And this is one of those kind of like story within a story type movies. You get a creepy old lady necromancer telling the story of Ernst Haeckel. And one day Haeckel gets a letter regarding his sick father, so he's got to go see him, apparently by foot, because he walks there, and it seems like it's kind of far. So I guess he had no horse or wagon or whatever. And on his travels, he encounters a guy named Walter, who invites him to stay at his house since it's getting pretty stormy out. And as you might expect, shit gets pretty weird and pretty quick. He's got a wife who's like 40 years younger than him, and Haeckel just kind of like stares at her constantly, like he is unable to keep his eyes off her, which is really awkward when you're like standing in right in front of someone's wife. She also has a baby that he sees with her later that night that nobody had ever mentioned. And he also hears like shrieking sounds outside. So yeah, it's weird. And so long story short, I guess, let's just say that Walter tells him a story about how he can't satisfy her and she has to get it elsewhere. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't know. It's a decent gothic story at best. And again, the mention of Victor Frankenstein I thought was really cool. And the fact that it was, like I said earlier, it was never a gimmick of any sort. If anything, I see it as, basically just Clive Barker giving a nod to Mary Shelley. Instead of science, the story goes for, it more goes for necromancy and also goes into classic zombie movie territory, which actually gave me some Italian horror vibes, which was really, really cool. There isn't a ton of gore here, or should I say it's more spread out, but when we do get it, it's really, really great. And there was no better person to give that job to than Greg Nicotero, of course, with the gore effects. And we all know Greg Nicotero's background with K&B effects and all that, so he's an absolute legend. So other than the Frankenstein stuff, I also got vibes of like Edgar Allan Poe and maybe even a little bit of Lovecraft. But all that said, I imagine this working much better as a short story, even if it's a decent 1-hour movie. The last 10 minutes are pretty damn cool, but it's kind of like the first 50 minutes aren't, I wouldn't say that they aren't interesting, but they don't quite match up to those last 10 minutes, especially, considering how bonkers they were. I suppose I'd recommend this to fans of sleazy horror, zombie movie obsessives, and anyone who wants to see a zombie gangbang. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.